had always thought of our town as the kind of place where nothing ever happens. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was the epitome of small-town quiet. Everyone knew everyone else, and secrets were hard to keep. So when my cousin Emma disappeared, the entire community was shaken to its core. It was the summer before my senior year of high school. The days were long and lazy, the air thick with the scent of pine and the distant hum of cicadas. Emma and I spent most of our time exploring the woods behind our grandparents' house. We'd been warned countless times not to wander too far, but the allure of the unknown always pulled us deeper. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting elongated shadows through the trees, Emma suggested we take a new path we discovered the week before. It was narrow and overgrown, barely visible beneath the underbrush. I hesitated, glancing back toward the familiar trail that led home. "Come on," she urged, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Don't you want to see where it leads?" I sighed, knowing I could never resist her adventurous spirit. "Fine, but if we get lost, it's on you." We pushed our way through the tangled branches, the sounds of the forest growing muffled as we ventured further. The air seemed to change, becoming cooler and still. After what felt like an hour, we stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood an old, weathered well, stones cracked and covered in moss. "Whoa!" Emma whispered, stepping forward. I felt a chill run down my spine. Maybe we should head back. But Emma was already peering over the edge of the well. "Do you think there's water down there?" she asked, her voice echoing softly. I joined her reluctantly, glancing into the darkness. It was too deep to see the bottom, probably dried up ages ago. Suddenly, a faint sound drifted up from the depths. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper. "Did you hear that?" Emma asked, her face pale. I nodded slowly. "It's just the wind." She shook her head. "No." It sounded like someone calling for help. Before I could stop her, Emma began to lower herself onto the ledge. "What are you doing?" I exclaimed, grabbing her arm. "I just want to see," she insisted. "Emma, stop. It's dangerous." She pulled away, her eyes fixated on the darkness below. "I have to know." At that moment, a sudden gust of wind rustled the trees, and the whispering grew louder, more distinct. It sounded like a chorus of voices, all murmuring in unison. "Let's go," I pleaded, panic rising in my chest. But Emma seemed entranced. She swung her legs over the side and began to climb down, disappearing into the shadows. "Emma!" I shouted, but there was no response. I waited, my heart pounding, listening to the whispers that now seemed to surround me. Minutes passed, then an hour. Emma never came back up. I ran back home as fast as I could, branches scratching my face and arms. When I burst into the kitchen, breathless and sobbing, my parents looked up in alarm. "Emma's gone," I managed to choke out. We searched the woods for days, but there was no sign of her. The well, when we found it again, was filled with nothing but darkness. The authorities concluded that she must have fallen and drowned, but they couldn't explain why there was no water, no body. As the weeks passed, strange things began to happen. At night, I would hear faint whispers outside my window, calling my name. Objects in the house would move on their own. A book sliding off a shelf, a door creaking open. My dreams were haunted by visions of Emma, her face pale and eyes distant, reaching out to me from the darkness. I tried to tell my parents, but they dismissed it as grief. "It's normal to feel this way," they assured me. It will get better with time. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. Emma wasn't just gone. She was somewhere else, somewhere she shouldn't be. And whatever had taken her was now coming for me. The days turned into weeks, and the oppressive weight of Emma's absence settled over our family like a dark cloud. School started again, but I drifted through the hallways like a ghost, barely aware of my surroundings. My friends tried to reach out, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. All I could think about was the well and the whispers that haunted my nights. One evening, as autumn leaves began to fall, I found myself drawn back to the woods. I knew it was reckless, but something compelled me to return. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, I retraced our steps from that fateful day. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife conspicuously absent. After what seemed like hours, I reached the clearing. The well stood as it had before, ancient stones seeming to absorb the light from my flashlight. I approached cautiously, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But I had to know. As I peered over the edge, a faint whisper echoed up from the depths. "Help me." My breath caught in my throat. It was Emma's voice. "Emma," I called out, my voice trembling. "Is that you?" Silence. Then, barely audible, "Please, it's so dark." I felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. "Hold on, I'm going to get help." "No." Her voice was sharp, urgent. "Don't leave me." I hesitated. The well was deep, and I had no rope or equipment. But if Emma was somehow alive down there, I looked around and found a sturdy-looking vine hanging from a nearby tree. Testing its strength, I secured it to a thick branch and began to lower myself into the well. The air grew colder as I descended, the stone walls damp and slick beneath my fingers. "Keep talking to me, Emma," I whispered. "I'm coming." But the only response was the growing chorus of whispers, indistinct and overlapping, filling my ears and making it hard to focus. Suddenly, the vine jerked, and I lost my grip. I fell, landing on a narrow ledge a few feet below. Pain shot through my ankle and I bit back a cry. Above me, the circle of light from the well's opening seemed impossibly distant. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a living thing. "Join us," they murmured. "Stay with us." Panic set in. I fumbled for my flashlight, which had miraculously survived the fall. Shining it around, I realized I wasn't at the bottom. There was a passageway carved into the stone, leading deeper underground. "Emma," I called out, my voice echoing. No response. Against my better judgment, I began to crawl through the narrow tunnel. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and decay. After a few minutes, the passage opened into a small chamber. In the center stood Emma. She turned slowly to face me, her eyes wide and unseeing. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her clothes were tattered. "Emma," relief washed over me. "We need to get out of here." She tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You came." "Of course I did. Everyone's been looking for you. Let's go." She didn't move. "I can't leave," she whispered. "What do you mean?" "We have to hurry. The others won't let me." A chill ran down my spine. "What others?" As if in response, shadows began to form along the walls, humanoid shapes that shifted and writhed. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "They want you to stay too," Emma said softly. I backed away, my heart hammering. "We need to go. Now." She reached out a hand. Stay with me." The shadows advanced, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Without another word, I turned and fled back through the tunnel, ignoring the pain in my ankle. The whispers turned to anguished cries, echoing behind me. Reaching the ledge, I scrambled up the vine, praying it would hold. As I emerged from the well, the last rays of sunlight were fading. I didn't look back as I ran through the forest, the whispers fading but never completely disappearing. When I finally burst into my house, my parents stared at me in shock. "Where have you been?" my mother demanded. "We've been worried sick." "I saw her," I gasped. "I saw Emma." They exchanged a concerned glance. "Honey, Emma is gone," my father said gently. "You need to accept that." "No, she's in the well. There are things down there." My mother's face paled. "This has gone on long enough. We're getting you help." Frustration and fear boiled over. "You have to believe me." But they wouldn't listen. That night, I was confined to my room, my parents whispering anxiously downstairs. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the whispers creeping back into my mind. "Join us." Sleep eventually overtook me, but my dreams were filled with shadows and the sightless eyes of my cousin. When I awoke, the morning light did little to dispel the darkness that clung to me. I knew what I had to do. If no one would help me save Emma, I would have to do it myself. The next morning, the weight of my decision pressed heavily on me. I needed a plan. If I was going to save Emma, I couldn't rush in blindly again. My mind raced with possibilities, and I realized I needed information. Anything that could help me understand what I was dealing with. I headed to the town's library after school, a quaint building that smelled of old paper and dust. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly librarian, looked up from her desk as I entered. "Well, if it isn't young Michael," she said with a warm smile. "What brings you here?" "I was wondering if you have any records or books about the woods behind the old Miller property," I replied. Her smile faded slightly. "That's quite a specific request. Any particular reason?" I hesitated. "Just working on a school project about local history." She nodded slowly. "Those woods have quite the history. Follow me." She led me to a section filled with old newspapers, town records, and faded journals. "You might find what you're looking for here," she said, her eyes searching mine. "Be careful what you dig up." "Thank you," I muttered, pulling out a stack of documents. Hours passed as I sifted through the materials. Frustration began to set in until an old newspaper clipping caught my eye. The headline read, "Tragedy at the Wishing Well. Children disappear without a trace." I read eagerly. The article was dated over 50 years ago and detailed the mysterious disappearance of several children who were last seen playing near an old well in the woods, the same well where Emma vanished. According to the article, the well was rumored to be cursed. Locals spoke of voices that lured people in, promising them their deepest desires. Those who listened were never seen again. A chill ran through me as I recalled the whispers I'd heard. I continued digging and found a faded journal belonging to a man named Arthur Mills, a local historian from decades past. His entries were unsettling. June 3rd, 1968. The townsfolk refuse to acknowledge the disappearances. They fear the well but won't speak of it. Superstition runs deep here. June 12th, 1968. I ventured to the well today. The whispers are real. They speak of promises, of reunions with lost loved ones. It's a trap, a siren's call. June 20th, 1968. I must seal the well. It's the only way to stop it. But I'm only one man. If anyone reads this, beware the voices. Do not listen. Asterisk. My heart pounded. Sealing the well might be the only way to stop whatever malevolent force resided there. But what would that mean for Emma? As the library prepared to close, Mrs. Thompson approached me. Find what you were looking for? I glanced up, unsure of how much to reveal. I think so. Do you know anything about Arthur Mills? She sighed softly. Arthur was my uncle. A good man, but obsessed with that well. It consumed him. Do you believe the stories? She studied me carefully. I believe there's darkness in this world we don't fully understand. Arthur tried to stop it, but vanished before he could. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Do you think it's possible to save someone who's been taken? Her eyes softened with sympathy. If someone you care about is lost, you must be cautious. The well preys on desperation. I nodded, her words both a warning and a challenge. Thank you for your help. As I left the library, dusk was falling. The streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I needed supplies. Rope, a stronger flashlight, anything that could help me navigate the darkness below. Back at home, I packed a backpack with everything I thought I might need, including a small pocket knife and a thermos of water. I scribbled a note to my parents, telling them I was staying over at a friend's house to study. Guilt gnawed at me for lying, but I couldn't risk them stopping me. Under the cover of night, I made my way back to the woods. The full moon cast an eerie glow through the canopy, illuminating the path ahead. Each step deeper into the forest amplified my apprehension, but I pressed on. Reaching the clearing, the well stood before me like a silent sentinel. The air was unnaturally still, and the usual nocturnal sounds were absent. I approached cautiously, the whispers beginning to stir at the edge of my hearing. Michael! The voice was unmistakably Emma's. I'm here, I called out softly. I'm going to get you out. I secured the rope around a sturdy tree and tied the other end around my waist. Taking a deep breath, I began my descent. The darkness swallowed me as I lowered myself down, the beam of my flashlight piercing the void. The stone walls were damp, and a faint trickle of water echoed below. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Almost there, I whispered to myself, trying to block out the voices. Reaching the ledge where I'd fallen before, I carefully stepped onto it and peered into the passageway. Steeling myself, I entered the tunnel once more. The chamber appeared as it had before, but this time, Emma was not alone. Figures emerged from the shadows, pale, spectral forms of children and adults alike, their eyes voids of darkness. Join us, they whispered in unison. Emma stepped forward. You came back. I promised I would, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. We're leaving. Now. She shook her head slowly. I can't. They won't let me. I glanced around at the figures encircling us. I won't leave without you. One of the specters glided closer. She belongs to the well, it hissed. She doesn't belong to anyone, I retorted. What do you want? Our time was cut short, the voices chorused. We seek to reclaim what was lost. I realized then that these were the spirits of those who had disappeared, trapped, perhaps, by the same force that now held Emma. There must be a way to free you, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. Emma's gaze met mine. You can't save me, but you can save yourself. I won't accept that. She reached out and touched my hand, a sensation both cold and strangely comforting. Then you must break the connection. Understanding dawned on me. The well was a conduit, a gateway binding these lost souls. If I could destroy it, maybe I could free them. I'll come back for you, I promised. She gave a faint smile. Be careful. I retreated slowly, keeping my eyes on the specters until I was back in the tunnel. Turning, I hurried to the rope and climbed as fast as I could. As I emerged from the well, a gust of wind nearly knocked me off balance, the whispers rising to a cacophony. I knew what I had to do. Gathering stones and debris, I began to fill the well's opening. The voices grew frantic, pleading, then angry. Stop, they wailed. You don't understand. I hesitated only for a moment before continuing. With each stone, the whispers faded, until finally, silence enveloped the clearing. Exhausted, I collapsed beside the now sealed well. Tears streamed down my face, not just for Emma, but for all the souls trapped below. I'm sorry, I whispered. The rustling of leaves drew my attention. Mrs. Thompson stepped into the clearing, her face etched with sorrow. You did what needed to be done, she said softly. You followed me? I had a feeling you'd come back here. She sat beside me. It's over now. But Emma, they're all still down there. She placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Their hold on this world has been severed. They'll find peace now. I looked up at the stars beginning to peek through the canopy. I hope so. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the night's events settling in. Eventually, Mrs. Thompson helped me to my feet. Let's get you home, she said gently. As we walked back through the forest, I felt a strange sense of closure. The whispers were gone, and the oppressive darkness had lifted. I knew the memories would haunt me, but perhaps in time healing could begin. At home, my parents were waiting, worry etched across their faces. Before they could scold me, Mrs. Thompson intervened. He's been through a lot, she told them. Give him some space. They seemed to understand, and that night, for the first time since Emma disappeared, I slept without nightmares. In the weeks that followed, life in the town slowly returned to normal. I visited the library often, talking with Mrs. Thompson about her uncle and the town's history. Together, we documented what we knew, preserving the stories so others might be warned. One afternoon, as I was leaving the library, I thought I heard a familiar laugh, a light, joyful sound that belonged to Emma. I turned, but there was no one there. Smiling softly, I took it as a sign that she was at peace. The well remained sealed, a silent monument to those lost. And while the scars of that summer would always remain, I found comfort in knowing I'd done everything I could. But sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind whispered through the trees, I couldn't help but wonder if the well was truly silent, or if, somewhere deep below, the voices still lingered, waiting for someone to listen.